Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at brown fur, the layering process and the colours involved. So if brown fur is your jam, then carry on watching. Before we start though, I want to know what colour fur is your favourite to create. Leave me a comment down below. If you haven't already checked it out, go and watch the first video in this series explaining my fur technique, as this tutorial is going to focus on the colours and the layering process more than actual fur technique. So the first layer that actually goes down is some warm grey one, and sometimes I mix this up and I go in with some ivory, but it really depends on whether the brown fur is warm or cool toned. For this example, mine is fairly cool, so I'm using the warm grey, and I just shade this down really lightly and use this to map out the fur direction. And I apply a couple of layers of this just to make sure the tone is nice and even and the paper is really nice and covered. Next, I add in a layer of cold grey one, and again I did this because my example has more of a slightly cooler toned fur, so if yours is warmer then you'd skip this colour and maybe go in with a layer of cream. And I use this next pencil in exactly the same way as the first, light pressure and gradually building in the direction of the fur. The first brown tone I like to use is Nougat, and this is good for warm or cool toned browns, and I start to use those little fur lines to start the texture off. I add this colour all over the area that I'm currently working on, even into the lighter areas, and just build this really light texture to begin with. Where there are lighter sections, I do actually spread the lines out a little more than in the darker ones. So the darker ones are more tightly compacted together, lighter ones are a little bit more spread. Once the nougat layer is down, I then go in with the darkest walnut brown and repeat exactly the same process. And if there are any darker clumps or really prominent fur patches, then I'll go in and add those in first and concentrate down a lot of fur lines in that area. If the fur is quite smooth and flat like my example, then I pretty much just add the lines all over and pay attention to any light patterns present. I add in quite a few layers of the walnut brown and just gradually get darker, because building the layers like this creates a really dense and full fur texture, which is absolutely perfect. Once I'm happy with the developing brown, I switch back to a mid-tone, this time of burnt sienna, and apply exactly the same process of creating fur lines and building the tone in the darker areas. We'll come back to the lighter sections where the darker areas are more solidly built. A few more layers of burnt sienna and the fur begins to look a lot more full, thick and dark, and you can really see the brown tone beginning to build. I switch back to the nougat and add in a few more detail lines through those lighter areas before blending out with a little bit of white to smooth the colours and the texture out a little bit. Then it's back to nougat and developing the lighter tones some more with some more of those fur lines. The key with the lighter tones is to add darker colours that you're using pretty sparsely and just add in like the fur line shadows to give the hint of texture. You don't want to texture it too much or you'll end up with the same tone as the darker areas. Back to walnut brown now to really darken the tone, and this time I'm applying a little bit more pressure to the pencil to get it as dark as I possibly can. All of the previous layers were all made with a really light pressure and gradually building. I continue the darkening process by switching back and forth between all my brown tones. I find that the walnut brown, the nougat and the burnt sienna work for pretty much all brown tones, but if your fur is particularly really on the cool side, then a Van Dyke brown would be really useful, and maybe switching out the burnt sienna. The final dark touches are made using some dark sepia, and I add this pretty sparingly and only use it for the really true dark tones of the fur. Now we get to the fun part of glazing, and this is where I introduce some unusual colours that maybe you don't think belong in brown fur. The three I like to use for glazing are Delft Blue, Manganese Violet and Terracotta. These are all my go-to ones, and when I use them depends on the tone once again. For cooler browns, I like to use the Delft Blue and I gently run this over the texture that I've already built with the previous colours. You want to use this really, really lightly, and this very subtly alters the tone and makes it a whole lot more vibrant and full of life. Terracotta is a good one for warmer tones, and I use this again in exactly the same way. This is good to use if your lighter patches are more along the lines of an almost cream coloured fur as well. Manganese Violet is one that I use regardless of tone. The orange hues present in the brown pencils really sing when a purple is placed next to them, and adding in this tone also creates some really beautiful shadows. I also use other varieties of purple ranging from the ultra rare light violet in the Polychromos all the way to blue violet, and it just makes the brown fur look a whole lot better. And remember to use this as a glazing colour though, so really lightly over the top. Don't go in and add too many fur lines or anything, or don't go too heavy, otherwise you're just going to end up with purple fur and not brown. Once a little glazing has been added, I then go back in and use my midtones to blend, burnish and smooth everything out, and just add in a little bit more texture before cooling the fur complete. And that's pretty much it for brown fur, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video and that it makes brown fur a lot simpler for you to create. If you did enjoy it, then make sure you leave a like on this video, and if you're new here, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button, as I'll be uploading new videos to this fur series every single week. Next month we'll be diving into some different fur lengths and textures before coming back to a few more unusual colours. So if there are any particular textures that you'd like to see, then leave them in the comments down below. Anyway guys, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!